so cool. It's
Where
just
did you get that?
It's very easy to obtain online.
Like where?
Oh, where? Amazon.
nice. I didn't know those were out there.
Can I take a picture of the cover, please?
Yeah, sure.
Because I want to get one of those.
Yeah, those are very convenient for Japanese language practice.
And it's
And the fact that it's in notebook form is nice, because then you don't have to worry about losing your pages. Okay, since we're up to part C, let's go ahead and practice. I've got C3 marked as a starting point. I think that we had only done Ichigo ni last time. Am I right?
C3. We finished.
C,
Oh, we didn't part of
Yeah, we were
it.
here.
yeah,
we
we,
stopped at gloves.
right, that's why I've got marked down in my notes, so. じゃあ、誰が始めますか? Who wants to start? はい、どうぞ。ジョーさんどうぞ。Oh, and let's see, who wants to be sensei versus gakusei? I don't remember who.
I was sensei last time.
Okay, you were sensei last time. You want to be sensei this time? Keep it going this direction, makes it easier for me to keep track of. So gakusei to gakusei. Hey. どうぞ。
おばあさんが
手袋。
手袋をくれました。
はい。And then the second way to say that would be
おばあさんに手袋をもらいます。
はい、もらいました。はい。
もらいました。
はい。So we're going to do both ways for every one so that we get more practice that way. じゃあ、どうぞ。
友達がバイクをくれました。
はい。
友達にバイクをもらいました。
いいプレゼントですね。すごい。はい。じゃあ、そうですね。5番。ビデオカメラ。
ビデオ。
カタカナ単語。どうぞ。
おじさんが
おじさん。おじさん、not おじいさん。Be careful.
おじさん。
Okay.
おじさんがビデオカメラをくれます。How do you say くれる?
くれました。Oh, well, and since it's since it's casual, you would do くれた。くれた。くれた。Past tense.
Okay, so
Past tense.
おじさんがビデオカメラをくれた。
はい。そして。
おじさんにビデオカメラをもらった。
はい、もらった。はい、いいですね。はい。
Okay, so when you say くれる or もらう is くれる is that more personal versus もらう?
No, くれる means someone gave it to me,
Yeah.
or someone who's more of an outsider to me gave it to someone who's more of an insider to me. We're going to talk about that in a minute.
Okay, yeah,
And
'cause
morao is I received, or someone received.
Because I read the grammar in the section and
Yeah.
it was a little confusing because I wasn't sure
Okay.
like is one supposed to be more personal or
Yeah,
whether-
the kureru ageru juxtaposition.
Mhm.
Kureru is more like someone gave it to me or someone close to me. And ageru is more giving to someone outside of my
Okay.
group. Okay, and then they don't even introduce like sashi ageru yet,
Yeah, 'cause
but
they
that's
didn't-
more of an honorific giving to someone who's higher status than me, so that's like another step beyond. But kureru, essentially kureru is more humble and ageru is a little bit more honorific,
Yeah.
but not all the way to the really honorific form. Ageru is a little bit more neutral. Kureru definitely has a humble cast to
Okay.
it. And so that's kind of the basic difference.
Okay.
And then morao is receive rather than give.
Mhm.
So they're, in a sense, they're opposites. It's the same action, but from the opposite perspective.
Okay.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, I give to you versus you give to me. Those are two opposite directions, right? So if
Yeah.
you're putting yourself in the subject position both times as the
Mhm.
one doing the action, you could say you receive from me
Mhm.
versus I give to you. In the second example, I'm the one doing the action.
Yeah.
In the first example, you're putting yourself central, that you're the one receiving it.
Yeah.
You see what I'm
Okay.
saying? So that's the difference between moral and kureru or ageru.
Yeah, it's confusing.
Yeah, that's why we're gonna talk about it in a little more detail.
Because I can see like with the example it's like kanodoga and then it kind of just omits the watashi ni, I guess.
Right, and that's part of the confusion for a lot of people, is we're not used to
Yeah,
leaving
'cause-
out those parts. So, yeah, so if we wanna use Oji-san example, so watashi ga Oji-san ni video camera o moratta, right?
Mhm.
Or Oji-san ga watashi ni video camera o kureta. Okay, I just did it in reverse order, sorry if that messed you up.
It's just, it was confusing me like the next activity with all the arrows.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, so let's, before we get to that one, we'll talk about my diagram on the board, but first let's let Joe-san do rokuban.
There's-
Rokuban,
Six.
hi. Yeah, it's around the circle.
Yeah.
See,
Oh,
that was
I
a
didn't
weird
see that.
arrangement,
I
isn't it?
thought this was.
I don't know why they didn't just do their example where rokuban
sorry,
is
I
and
would-
go all the way around from
Yes.
there. That's
I wouldn't have
Very
asked
odd.
that question if I knew we were still.
Yeah, that's okay.
あ、そう。お兄さんが時計をくれました。
はい。
お兄さんに時をもらいました。
はい、時計をもらいました。はい。And the other difference that I want you guys to start thinking about and start getting used to is instead of saying oni-san, you could say ani.
Ani.
Yeah,
Ani
because
and
we're,
Ane.
yeah, ani for older brother, ane for older sister. You already know, I think, to drop the san off of ototo and imoto when you're talking about your own, but putting san on if you're talking about someone else's younger siblings.
And then
Okay.
like when you're talking about your parents, it's like chichi and
Chichi haha instead of otosan okasan. I don't think they've introduced sofu and sobo yet, but those would be grandparents' terms. Sofu would be like one's own grandfather. Sobo would be one's own grandmother versus oji-san, oba-san, meaning someone else's grandparents. And then I think it's just oji, oba for one's own aunt and uncle and aunt, and versus oji-san, oba-san. So yeah, and then ryoshin for parents together. Ryoshin versus go-ryoshin for someone else's parents. The go is the honorific prefix go. And the same thing for kazoku. Uchi no kazoku would be one's own family. Go kazoku would be someone else's family with the honorific go again. And that all of that stuff comes into play increasingly as we get further into this book, because I start teaching more and more of the honorific and humble forms as we go along. So you can start differentiating not just two basic levels, neutral, polite, and casual, which is all we've really had thus far, but then they start adding a third level of more polite, neutral polite, and casual. And the more polite gets divided up into humble for talking about one's self and one's own in-group, and honorific for talking about outsiders. And so this diagram on here applies to a lot more than just kureru, ageru. It actually applies to any humble versus honorific dichotomy that you encounter. And so the way this works is if you're talking about yourself, jibun, to anybody else that you feel you need to be polite to, you can use the humble forms. So even if you're just talking to your own family members about something they gave you, you would use, Ototo ga ano hono kureta. Little brother gave me that book. Or, imoto ni ano zashi o moratta. I got that magazine from my little sister. Right? So even talking within the family, telling one of your siblings what your other sibling gave you, you would use casual structures within the family, but you would use kureta and moratta. You wouldn't use ageta. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay.
However, within that, if you are talking about two other family members giving and receiving stuff to one another, you would switch to ageru to indicate that you're not the one they gave it to. They gave it to somebody else within the family. So, otou-san ga okaasan ni hono ageta. Dad gave it to mom, right?
Oh, okay, I can see now.
So see how there's that difference versus otou-san ga watashi ni hono kureta. So kureta when he gave it to me, ageta when he gave it to anybody else, right? So that's your dividing line when you're talking about yourself and your family. If you're talking about yourself or your family to somebody who's a friend, family becomes part of your in-group. That's what these concentric circles are about,
Yeah.
right? So if you're telling your friend what your dad gave you, you would use otou-san ga kono hono kureta, right? Or chichi ga, in that case, because you're talking to somebody who's outside your family, right? So chichi ga kono hono kureta. Or chichi ni kono hono moratta, right? If you're talking about something that a family member of yours gave to that person,
Use ageta.
yeah, chichi ga kono hono ageta, right? Tomodachi ni ageta. And my dad gave this book to my friend, right? If you're talking about two friends giving stuff to one another, you would use ageru, right? If you're talking about one of these friends giving something to you or to a family member, you would use kureru. Does that make sense? Okay, and the same thing as you go further out. If you're talking about you or your family member or your friend exchanging gifts with somebody that's only an acquaintance, shiriai is acquaintance, someone you know if you meet them, but you don't necessarily know them as well as tomodachi. So an acquaintance or somebody you have to be politer to, like a sensei. There's a little bit more distance there. Sensei doesn't count the same as tomodachi in Japanese society. So that would be a little bit further outside your group, right? So if your friend gave something to your acquaintance, tomodachi ga ano hito ni hono ageta. If this shiriai acquaintance gave something to your friend, ano hito ga tomodachi ni ano hono kureta. You can actually use kureta instead of ageta there to indicate your relative closeness to this person and your relative distance from that person. Okay, and it even extends all the way to, somebody you don't know being the furthest out in your out group, basically. Does that make sense? So the definition of who's in group and who's out group shifts depending on the relationship involved. So whenever you've got two people, you know, you're your in-group and the other person is the out-group kind of, because it's only the two of you talking, right? Whenever you add a third person, then you and whoever you're closer to of that group becomes more of your in-group, and the third person becomes more of the outsider. Or if you're equally distant from both people, you're the in-group and they're both the out-group. So like me talking to the three of you guys, you're all kind of equal because you're all my students, right? So you're all out-group to me if I'm telling you about something that my family did or that my kids said or something like that. But if I'm talking to you guys about, say, one of my other students from another class, you guys and those other students are equally out-grouped to me, unless I've just known you guys longer, so I feel closer to you compared to those people because I just met them. So like my level 1 people that are all new to me, maybe they're a little bit more out-grouped still than you guys are because I've known you guys a few semesters now, right? But then if I'm talking about, say, somebody I know from elsewhere that's not part of this school, then I have to make my own decision. Okay, is that person more my in-group or are you guys more my in-group? And I have to talk about it relative to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's just like, it's hard to keep straight in your brain.
Yeah. It's one of those things that takes a lot of practice when you don't grow up with it.
Yeah.
You know, the equivalent, the closest equivalent I can come up with for American society, because we don't have as many gradations and levels of this, and we don't have as strict a structure around it, but think about how you talk to your best friend versus how you talk to, say, your parents' boss if you met your mom's or your dad's boss from work, versus meeting the President of the United States. You know, there's going to be differences in how you address those different people, right? You have to go that extreme to find good examples of it in American society. You can walk down the street and find examples of it in Japanese society because it's just more prevalent there, that you don't talk the same way to the stranger in the subway that you talk to the acquaintance in your classroom. Even though you might not have known the person in your classroom for very long, there's still a little bit more of an in-group association there because you're taking the same class together versus you're just sitting on the same bench in a subway train.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So that's one reason why sometimes Japanese people seem hard to get to know, and sometimes foreigners living there will feel like they're not being let in. Because some Japanese people are more closed to anybody who's a gaijin, because to them that's outside person, that's out-group. And for some Japanese people, it doesn't matter how long you live there, how fluent you are, some of them will always see you as out-group just because you're not Japanese. Some of them...
Is it partly racist?
It can be. Yeah, it can be. And it's not necessarily race as in Asian versus not Asian. Sometimes it's race as in ethnicity,
Yeah.
Japanese versus non-Japanese. But then I've also got some very good friends in Japan who don't think that way at all. A lot of times it depends on how much foreign influence they had in their upbringing. I've got some very close friends who were raised part of their childhood overseas,
Mm-hmm.
and so even after they went back to Japan and they became fully immersed again in Japanese society, they always retained that feeling of, well, you know, people from other countries are still potentially part of my in-group.
Okay, what about people who are like born, like Japanese people who were raised in America? And then
They sometimes have the same problem,
Yeah.
going back and having discrimination because, being discriminated against because
technically
they're
an
technically,
American.
Right. Well, technically they're Japanese, but Japanese
Yeah.
people can be very harsh about the fact that they're maybe not perfectly fluent, or they don't know quite as many kanji as somebody who was born and raised there, or they're a little bit less proficient at some aspect of Japanese society. Maybe they were a little awkward in how they bowed, or a little awkward in their usage of some of this polite language. Japanese society can be very critical of those kinds of differences. And it can be, some people can be sort of hypocritical about it too, that they're not as critical of somebody who is born and raised in Japan and maybe just doesn't have the best manners versus somebody who was raised overseas, and so they're scrutinizing more closely to see if they're going to slip up. And there are societal differences in Japan too. So, socioeconomic status makes a difference. There are poorer people who their language is coarser, they use casual speech more readily, they go formal less frequently, and rich people might look down their noses at that and say, well, they don't know the right thing to do, stuff like that. So all the same prejudices that any other society can have, they have too. The difference is that theirs are sort of enshrined in the way the language is built too.
Yeah.
So you can very easily verbalize your discrimination with the words you choose to use, just the conjugation you choose, or the intonation you put on it can mean different things in different circumstances. And some people take this stuff very seriously, and some people have a more casual attitude about it all. I had Japanese friends who were as laid back as hippies at Woodstock, and then I had other Japanese friends who were really uptight about all this. So there are as many individual differences as any other society. The difference with Japanese society, I think, is because being too individualistic is frowned upon, even the people who are more laid back about this stuff, they might kind of hide that aspect of themselves from people that they don't know well enough to know if that person's going to be accepting of them if they're that laid back. And then with somebody they feel comfortable with, convention can get tossed out the window a little bit more, and they can be more their true selves. But Japanese has a concept of tate and mae, where you've got like this facade that you put up, and you act proper in front of people you don't know very well, and there are layers of how much of your true self you're going to let people see, depending on how close you are, how comfortable you feel with them, your own personality, whether you feel comfortable opening up to people you don't know that well. Some Japanese people are more comfortable opening up that way to foreigners because they feel like, well, you're not part of this society. You're not going to judge me if I don't use all the proper forms every time, So especially the people who are sort of misfits in Japan, the ones who like foreign cultures and wish that Japan was more laid back, will often gravitate toward friendships with foreigners and even professions where they get to interact more with foreigners because they're not that comfortable with the sort of uptight, stuffy side of Japanese society. So there's lots of variation. But, it can be very cliquish at times.
Yeah.
But knowing these concepts helps. Knowing the different grammar structures and the different vocabulary words to use helps, so that when you do meet somebody who's more formal, if you can impress them with your own proper usage of things, they're not expecting perfection from gaijin. So if you can give them something better than what they would have expected in terms of your own use of proper forms and things, they will be so impressed that they'll generally have a better impression of you in general, and you're like an ambassador for Americans as a whole. You know, if you're the first American they've met, which is very possible in the countryside especially,
Yeah.
you know, you're like an ambassador, and that's a lot of pressure sometimes, but if you can give a good impression, then they're going to be more skeptical of the stereotype of the arrogant, boorish American, which is kind of a universal worldwide stereotype, unfortunately, that
Yeah.
most countries seem to have of us. So if you can give a good impression, you're helping to
They're not
mitigate
wrong.
that.
They are, like,
Yeah, but they, you know, just like any other culture, we're not all like that.
yeah.
So, you know, it helps if somebody who, you know, looks like the typical American can prove that, hey, we're not all like that. Some of us are capable of learning your culture, being polite by your standards, you know, learning your language and pronouncing it well enough that we don't sound ridiculous, you know. You know, so, yeah, it's a very interesting experience, especially living in the small town areas of Japan. And you do encounter people who literally have never gotten to know a foreigner before.
Mhm.
You know, they may have seen them in the streets, but they've never actually gotten to know them as a real human being. It's an interesting thing to be that sort of an ambassador for your own country and culture in a way that you probably weren't expecting when you got there. You know. So using that concept, does that help you kind of differentiate who's going to be using which term? So on this exercise, the watashi in the middle is our in-group, right? And we're basically assuming that all of the friends around this watashi are basically equally out-group from one another and from her, okay? So everything that she's giving to someone else, she's going to use which verb?
I get it.
Ageru, right. And everything that she's receiving from someone else, she's going to use either morao, the receiving verb, right? Or they're going to give it to her with kureru, right? So they've, I know this is a complicated looking diagram, but it's simple in the sense that they're not using kureru between two other people, because we're assuming that all of the people in her circle here are equally her friends. So we're not worried about, you know, well, she's closer friends with this guy and not as close friends with that one, so she has to use
Oh, yeah.
kureru instead of ageru or whatever, you know. We're not worrying about that. So it's just kureru for everyone giving something to watashi, and ageru for everybody else. Does that make sense? So let's try it.
So is it, all right, so when I was reading from the little explanation
Mhm.
they gave about 3, are there just situations where you can just not have to say, like, use morale, and you can just use kureru, because they're both contextually basically the same?
Right, I mean,
And it's just like in English where you can technically avoid saying I or was given. You can say like what I received or
right,
or,
yeah, I received
Or-
is morao, and someone gave me was kureru, right?
yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the
But it's
kureru
basically
and
the
morao
structure.
they're two different grammar structures, but in terms of describing what happened, they're basically interchangeable. So in real life, you would use one or the other, not both,
Yeah.
right? Either you would say, tomodachi ga hono kureta, Or you would say, 友達に本をもらった。Right? Either my friend gave me a book or I got a book from my friend. You wouldn't necessarily say both because it's redundant, right?
Yeah.
We're practicing both to learn to differentiate between them and to understand how to put both of those sentence structures together, because the reversal of the particles trips people up sometimes.
So is there, I don't know, like, Japanese kind of seems like it's all about flow, and I feel like the way that something sounds, like, and I guess, does it really come down to just preference by how you want to structure it? If you want to use modal or kurere in a situation?
Yeah, 友達に
Or is there going to be a
本をもらった
situation?
友達が本をもらったの本をくれた。
I
I
mean,
mean,
there's
if
situations.
I guess the situation where you would choose one over the other is if you want to put more emphasis on the fact that you received it, or you'd rather put more emphasis on the fact that that person did the giving. So morale has a little bit more, I don't want to say that one sounds more grateful than the other, because that's not really true, but moratta puts the emphasis on the fact that I received it. Kureta puts more emphasis on the fact that someone else was generous enough to give it to me.
Yeah, like, say, I don't know, like, I think of it kind of like you receive, like, a letter from, like, a president, or you
Yeah.
receive something versus, like, just like you said, you got something from someone.
Somebody gave it to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
'Cause you wouldn't,
it's a connotation difference that's very hard to pin down, and the best advice I can give you, not just for this particular structure, but for any place where there's a minor difference and it's hard to pin down where that difference is or what's different about it, is listen to it in context. Seek out Japanese film and TV situations where they're giving and receiving, and see if you can listen for and watch for what they say and when they say it and what the situation is, so that you can start to get a feel for, okay, in those kinds of situations maybe morale is more common, in these kinds of situations maybe kureru is more common. But it's really hard to pin down. It's probably even harder than the wa-ga thing, because the wa-ga has grammar rules. They're just hard to explicate, right? But the morale kureru difference, I mean, once you get past the fact that, yes, the structure of the sentence is slightly different, but if you're just talking purely about, in this circumstance, would it be better to say this one or that one, it's partly personal preference, it's partly situation, it's partly culture, and it's really hard to pin down if one is really better than the other in a given circumstance.
Yeah, I mean, I had a Japanese local try to spend like an hour explaining to me like why you use wa or ga.
Yeah.
Mainly because she actually couldn't really figure it out herself. And I feel
Yeah.
like there's
Yeah, there's
plenty of that in our own
Oh
language.
yeah, there are
so-
plenty of things that you can't explain easily, especially if you don't have ESL training about English, right? Yeah, I mean, why the heck is OUGH pronounced 3, 4, 5 different ways? Who can explain that? Cough, though, all those different pronunciations and spellings. Yeah,
Like
some of it
occurred
just
to
doesn't
me,
make sense.
that their use of dole, which is basically like more or less our equivalent of how, our how in our language is used in like a lot of ways that don't really make any sense.
Yeah.
And then so I just thought about that the other day.
And the same thing is true of something like doshite, which,
why?
doshite can be why, but it can also be like, how did you do it? Doshiteta.
Couldn't it also be
Yeah,
like,
how were you doing it?
like what's up, like dosh
And dostano can be like, are you okay?
Yeah.
You know, so it's idiomatic. At some point, logic ceases to apply, and you just have to get used to, okay, this is the idiom, this is the way Japanese people use it in the 21st century. Because you know some of that stuff has changed drastically over the centuries too. And it's an ancient language. You know, so if you think about it in those terms, I mean, if you think about how unrecognizable English would be if you go back 1,000 years. Right?
Oh yeah, like old English.
Yeah, Japanese has changed just as drastically, you know.
Yeah, that's why like it's so much easier to just to figure out your own language and other languages just by going on context and not trying to figure out the word based on like
Right.
meaning and
Yeah,
stuff like
I
that,
mean,
'cause-
for myself, I find that I like knowing the breakdown sometimes
but
because
yeah,
sometimes
at least they have breakdown like a kanji.
the helpfulness of knowing like, oh, kamoshirenai breaks down to the question word ka, the mo like also, and then
Not
shiru to know, shirareru to not be able to know, you know, shiranai, kamoshiranai. So to be unable to know something, perhaps, you know, kamoshiranai, you know. You know, it helps, but if you take it too literally, it stops helping, right? It helps to know, well, that's where it came from, but it's not exact literal translation anymore. It basically translates to maybe, right? So, which even in English, I mean, maybe was the breakdown of maybe, right? It may be true, it may not be true. Right? So, you know, I like that stuff, I like etymology and all that, but there comes a point where it ceases to be useful.
Yeah. I thought about the expression in English, how sad or how awful, and I realized like that isn't, like I don't know how to explain that expression at all.
Right.
Like I don't, because
Yeah.
the word, the usage of the word how is like,
Yeah, it doesn't work if you try to do it too literally there, yeah. So, and there are things like that in Japanese, and there are things that have a very specific meaning in Japanese that we just don't have an exact word for in English, like natsukashi. The closest to natsukashi is nostalgic, but it's not exactly that, you know. So there are words that just plain don't translate exactly because it's a different language and it's a different worldview.
yeah.
And so at some point you have to realize that, you know, somebody who grew up in a different culture with a different worldview and a different language, of course there are going to be words for things that we don't have words for. There are concepts that matter more in one culture than in another. Sometimes it's as purely physical as the Inuit having a dozen different words for different kinds of snow that we don't have words for, you know, and sometimes it's like kureru, murao, ageru, which, you know, we don't have an English equivalent to the differentiation between kureru and ageru, right? We have a difference between kureru and murao, but where we draw the dividing line of whether I should say I received that from Joe or Joe gave it to me, I mean, how do you decide? If you're a native speaker, you just say the one that comes naturally out of your mouth, and you don't worry about it, right? So to some degree, you have to kind of get to that place with Japanese where one or the other just comes out of your mouth, and you cease to worry about whether or not you picked the right one.
So you have a 33% chance to get it right.
Right, yeah.
That's terrible.
Yeah, well, if you get your grammar structure straight,
Mhm.
then it's more like a 50-50 chance, because it's
Yeah.
just, if you're the one getting something, then it's either morao or kureru.
Mhm.
Ageru doesn't apply
Yeah.
there, right? If you're confused about who's doing the giving to whom, then you've got a bigger problem. So let's try D.
Okay.
Eddie-san, why don't you read the examples for us? There are a couple of them.
Okay. Kyoko-san wa Diego-san ni toe na
Torena.
Oh, the sweatshirt.
Yeah, sweatshirt.
Torena
Torena.
o agemashita.
はい。
Diego-san wa Kyoko-san ni torena o moraimashita.
はい. So you see how those two are interchangeable in this circumstance? Because it depends on, are you emphasizing that Kyoko gave it to him, or are you emphasizing that Diego got it from her? You know, which verb you use, it just changes the emphasis from the giving versus the
Do
receiving.
you want us to use both?
Yeah, I want you to practice both forms for each one as it applies, so that we can practice both structures. And that's part of the key, is if both structures come to you easily enough that you can say whichever one you want, then you don't have to worry about it anymore. Whichever one comes to you naturally in that moment is fine. You know, if you feel constrained because you're able to say one way and you're unable to say it the other way, then there are going to be circumstances where the other way might have suited better and you can't do it because you never learned that way. Or more likely, somebody's going to say it to you that other way and you're going to be confused because you never learned it properly. It's kind of like the ni-e structural difference with, you know, Tokyo e ikimasu versus Tokyo ni ikimasu. They really are pretty much interchangeable there. It doesn't really matter which you choose. But if you only ever learned one of them, and somebody who's a native speaker says the other, you're going to be standing there going, what did he just say? Right?
Yeah.
So, Saisu-kun, ichiban onegaishimasu. If you can find the ichi, there it is, the
Yeah,
chocolates. Chocoreto.
Burrito, that's right.
Yeah,
it's
chocoreto.
Chocoreto.
Yeah, it's not the same as Spanish this time.
All right. At least they make the name now Naomi, whatever. However we say
Naomi,
it's stupid.
yeah.
Like anyway.
Chocoreto.
Maybe Watashi first or Diego first. I don't know.
You decide.
Oh, I guess I do have to decide. Oh my God. I don't have to say I gave it at all, right? Technically.
Right. You put the sentence together how you want to put it together.
You gave Diego chocolates.
Yeah.
Or
So
he received.
Diego-san wa, or Diego-san ga chocoreto ni,
Diego-sanがチョコレートを
o agemashita, maybe.
No,
You
he
said-
did not give it to you. You gave
No,
it to
I
him.
know. I don't know. I don't have any idea how to say
Okay.
this because it did not.
Okay, so you're still confused
Yeah,
about
no,
it.
you confused me more. I think I had it figured out
Oh, okay,
before.
sorry.
Diego-san
So,
ni-
de watashi ga, it's probably easier for now if you keep the watashi in. That might be less confusing.
Yeah.
So, watashi wa Diego-san ni chocoreto o agemashita, right?
Okay, so
and then-
would it be watashi wa Diego ni?
Yeah. Watashi wa Diego-san ni chocoreto
Diego-san
o
ni.
agemashita. You gave it to him, right?
Yeah,
The ni
yeah,
is like
okay.
to, right? And then Diego-san ga watashi ni chocoreto o moraimashita. That one is a little bit weird to say just because you don't normally talk about yourself
in the middle
in
of
the,
the sentence.
in the not so much in the middle of the sentence, but the fact that he received it from me. Normally, you don't talk about yourself in the third person that way, where you're talking about, well, Diego received this from me. You know, that is in Japanese culture. I think it comes across, and maybe even in English, as a little bit bragging, like, oh, look at that nice gift he got. Yeah, he got that from me. You know, it sounds like you're a little overly proud of yourself for giving him such a nice gift. You know.
Sausage
So.
chocolates.
Yeah. So in this particular case, I think
Yeah.
私が or 私はデイゴさんにチョコレートをあげました would be the more natural choice. The other one works grammatically, but maybe not culturally. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so if it was,
Those are really the only two choices. Kureru doesn't come into
No,
play here at all, because he didn't give you something in this example, you gave him something. Right?
yeah, so if I want to say that I'm giving it to him, the
So-
other way.
There really is
Diego-san
only
wa
one way for
for
this
this
one.
one?
For this one, it would be 私は Diego-san に
Okay.
チョコレートをあげました。
Yeah.
あげた in this case, since you're a
あげた
sensei.
Okay. So
So 私は
私はディエゴさんにチョコレートをあげまた。
あげました or あげた。
あげた、sorry.
はい、あげた。
So used to keeping them off. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, あげました or あげた。Yeah, あげまった sounds like a dialect conjugation.
That sounds weird. Sounds like
Yeah.
I'm waiting to give him to him.
Yeah, no, it actually is a dialect.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So, any questions about that one? So we've determined that Daigo-san wa watashi ni chocolateをもらいました works grammatically but sounds conceited. Okay? じゃあ、ジョーさん、2番お願いします。
私は京子さんにぬいぐるみ
ぬいぐるみ
ぬいぐるみをもらいました。
もらいました。はい。ぬいぐるみをもらいました。And then the other way to say that would be
京子さんは私にぬいぐるみをあげました。
はい。There you go. Does everybody get how when you're the receiving end of something, both I received and so and so gave me work equally well? Okay? はい。じゃあ、3番どうぞ。
メリーさんは私に手袋
手袋。
をあげました。
Not あげました but since you're the one receiving it,
もらいました。
well, she gave it to you. You put it together. The gave. So メアリーさんは私に手袋をくれました。And then the other one would be 私は
メリーさんに手袋をあげ
もらいました。
ました。
Because I got them from her.
Okay.
So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
One is emphasizing that she did the action of giving, and the other is emphasizing that I got to receive.
Okay.
Okay? じゃあ、セス君、4番お願いします。たけし and Mary.
Okay. So Takeshi would be first here, wouldn't it? Takeshi wa Meri-san ni hana o ageta.
はい、たけしさんはメアリーさんに花をあげた。And then the other way you could do it also would be
Reverse their names.
and
Yeah, and
And the
then
verb, yeah.
the other verb. Yeah. Okay.
So-
So Mei-san, would it be ga or wa? I don't know.
メアリーさんは
Yeah, it's
they're using law for both here. That's fine. You can switch to ga, but you don't have to. メアリさんは
メリさんは、
たけしさんに
okay, yeah. メリさんはたけしさんに花をもらった。
はい、もらった。Okay? Everybody figuring this out?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes practical application works better than long-winded explanation. ゾウさん。
メアリさんはたけしさんに靴をあげました。
はい。
たけしさんはメリさんに、
はい、メアリさんに。はい。
靴をもらいました。
はい、そうですね。じゃあ、6番。
私はたけしさんに漫画をあげました。
はい。
たけしさんが漫画をもらいました。
There you go. That's a solution for the other way. If you leave out the watashi wa part, it doesn't sound conceited anymore because all you're saying is that Takashi received manga. You're not saying who from.
Okay.
So that's a good way to use morao in a sentence without sounding conceited when you're telling about something that someone else got from you. You know, it's a little bit like, you know, pretending that he got it from Santa Claus instead of admitting that you gave it to him. You know? Alright.
Is there an instance where you use watashi ga for making sure they know, like, you know, if somebody doesn't know who and they wanted to ask, or would you just say watashi wa?
You could conceivably use ga there. That waga connection is another thing that could take an hour and a half to try to explain and still not get anywhere. So, we're up to 7番ですね。
スーさんはロバットに本をあげました。
Other way around. もらいました。
もらいました。Yeah, she got it.
もらいました。はい。And then the other sentence would be.
Yeah, this is not sinking in for me right now. I hate studying in groups.
Oh, okay.
Alright. ロバートさんはスーさんに本をあげました。
はい。
Yes.
そうですね。Okay. Because あげました is gave and もらいました is received. So you gotta remember that as your.
Yeah, that's not the part. That's not the verbs that are confusing me. It's the usage, like where the names are and.
Yeah. Where the names are doesn't matter as much as which particle is paired with the name.
Oh.
You know, Japanese structure has a certain amount of flexibility in terms of, you know, the way I like to talk about it is that the noun plus the particle that belongs with it is like a unit. And as long as the verb unit is at the end, the noun units can change places and it still makes sense.
Okay, so it's always going to mean for this
It's
situation.
which one gets the wa and which one gets the ni that really matters. Do you see what I'm saying? Because the wa.
Yeah, Susan ni moratta.
No, Susan
here.
ni ageta, gave it to her. Robato-san ga Susan ni ageta. Susan ga or Susan wa Robato-san ni moratta. So if you're using the verb morao to receive, then the ni applies to who gave it, who she received it from. In this case, ni can be either from so-and-so, if you're talking about morao. Person A ni moraimashita means person I received it from person A. Okay? Person A ni agemashita means I gave it to person A. So maybe part of the problem is that the ni is changing meaning from to from, depending on which verb you're using. Ni agemashita means gave it to. Ni moraimashita means received it from. Does that make any sense? Or did I just make it worse? Another way to think about it is you can, for the morao part only, for the verb morao, you can actually take the ni out and put kara instead. Person kara moraimashita. I received it from a person. Person kara moraimashita.
I have a question. Like,
Hi.
would you also do that? Like, say, like it's a country, like you like bought something online and you say like, Chugoku kara like omaimashita. I don't mean to get too off.
That sort of sounds like China gave it to you, which is weird.
Oh,
But Chugoku kara kimashita, it came from China.
Oh, okay.
You can use it there. Chugoku kara chumonshita, I ordered it from China.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, kaimashita. I'm not sure if you can use kara for kaimas to buy, but you can use ordered from, I think.
Okay.
Kara chumonshimashita.
Yeah, I was just wondering.
Yeah. Yeah, and website de kaimashita. You would use de for on the website, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, are you still lost?
I'm not really lost. It's really hard. I don't know why, but it's really
Yeah.
hard for me to think like properly in a group setting. I don't know
Okay.
why.
Well,
It's really hard.
my suggestion going forward is what these guys often do, and what I really highly recommend you do, is go ahead and work ahead and actually do the best you can to write these sentences out ahead of time before you come into class, and then you read them and you find out if you're correct or not. When it's your turn, you read yours aloud. And if it needs correcting, we'll correct it, but if you got it right, then you're not having to try to think on your feet so much. Because all of this is going to be due as homework anyway. So you're going to have to write it out sometime. You might as well do it before class so that you come in feeling more prepared.
And we can also practice these exercises online too.
Right.
through Skype.
And this one has the CD symbol. That means that it's on the listening CD. So you can actually listen to that as a sort of answer key. What I recommend is, depending on whether you feel like you need more grammar practice or more listening comprehension practice, either write out the exercise first and then listen to check your work, or listen first to see how much you can comprehend, and then write out your answers. And then you could go back and listen again to see if it matches up with what you wrote. So depending on whether you're struggling so much with the grammar that you are afraid you're going to write it wrong and get all that practice wrong, or whether you feel like, you listening to it without preparing first, you might not follow what they're saying. You can decide for yourself which methodology works best for you, but I think that's a good use of your time. And then if you come in feeling like, okay, I did part D at home, I didn't have any trouble with it, we could spot check it and then move on to the next exercise if everybody agrees with that. Or if you feel like you're uncertain about it, then we can go through it all, but we wouldn't necessarily need to take quite as much class time on it if everybody's already done the work ahead of time and has an assessment of whether they think they got it right or whether they think they're totally off. Okay, and if you do that listening, like I said, you can check your work and you'll know coming in whether you're still struggling with the concept or not, because you'll be able to match up. Did they say what I thought I was supposed to write? No, I wrote it completely wrong. I don't understand why though. You know, or, oh, yeah, they're saying exactly what I wrote down. Good. You know, you'll be able to kind of test for yourself. So that's, at this level, that's kind of what I'm expecting of people. Okay? So, what are we up to here?
We're on
So, we
7.
did Robato-san, okay? No. So, do we need to go over what that answer was again, or are you ready to move to the next one? じゃあ、ジョーさん、8番お願いします。
ロバートさんは私にセーターをあげました。
セーターを、
もらいました？
No, ロバートさんが私にセーターを
あげました。
くれまし。
くれましたた。
Yeah, because he gave it to me, right?
Right, okay.
Yeah,
That makes
so
sense.
that's the humble form. He gave it to lowly little me. Okay, and then the other version would be?
So, それでロバートさん。So, 私はロバートさんにセーターをあげました。
はい。No,
No?
no, you didn't give him a sweater. He gave you a sweater,
Oh.
or you received a sweater from
received
him.
a sweater.
ロバートさんは私にセーター
セーターを
をあげました。
くれました。
くれました。
or 私がロバートさんにセーターをもらいました。Okay, that's the difference. Here's another diagram that may help. Okay, here is, okay, くれる. What am I doing here? Is okay, so if someone is giving it to you, this would be watashi. They're like giving it, you're humble, you're down, and they're up. Kureru. If you're giving it to somebody else, it's more like equal or slightly up. You're giving it to somebody politely. Ageru. Does that make sense? So you're taking the humble position with kureru every time, regardless of the status of the person who gave it to you. Okay? Just the fact that they're giving it to you, you're taking the humble position. Does that make sense? And ageru, sorry, not ageru. Ageru is to give to somebody, which if it's A gave to B, it's kind of, it could be equals.
Mm-hmm.
If it's watashi gave to someone else, it's slightly up, okay? The third one that's going to come into play later is way up like that. That's like, you know, I'm giving it to you like this, you know? That one's coming in a later chapter, so we don't need to talk about it yet. But do you see what I'm saying about the levels? Does that help clarify it at all?
Yeah.
Okay. And this is only for kureru, ageru, and the other one that we haven't learned yet. Morao is still receiving from someone else, right? And that one's also down to watashi or whoever's getting it, whoever's receiving it. So regardless of which person is giving it, it's down to me or to the other person who's doing the receiving. Does that make sense? So in that sense, moral and kureru are kind of on the same level in the sense that in both cases, the person getting it is humble. Does that make sense? But this one is putting the watashi in the driver's seat, kind of. I received. This one is putting the other person in the driver's seat. He gave to me. You know, that's what controls where the wa goes, because it's with the person who's in the driver's seat, which is the other person with kureru, and it's the watashi with morao. Watashi wa, that other person ni moraimashita, right? But that other person wa watashi ni kuremashita. Does that help clarify it? Okay. I know that these, I remember when I was a student, and I remember having a headache after that class because these concepts are really frustrating until you get used to it. It's kind of like lend and borrow. They give you nightmares until you get it, and one day it just sort of clicks, and then you're fine. You know? Okay. So, 私はロバートさんに生徒をもらいました。or ロバートさんは私に生徒をくれました。Right? じゃあ9番。
ナオミはケンさんにネクタイをあげました。ケンさんはナオミさんにネクタイをもらいました。
はい。いいですね。じゃあ、さっくん、10番。やってみましょう。
ケンさんは私にみかん、みかんをくれた。
はい。
私はケンさんにみかんをもらった。
はい、そうですね。Sounds like you're starting to feel more comfortable with it. You got both of those
It's
just
not
exactly
really
right.
that complicated. It's just like I said, my brain just shuts off in specific situations.
Okay, but that time you got it exactly right.
Well, no,
so.
it's like it's written so like, you know, it's right there. And
Yeah.
to be honest with you, I didn't. I looked at this today
Uh-huh.
before class and not this, so
okay.
I wasted time basically this morning.
Oh,
I
okay.
went in completely blind again.
Yeah, well, since I didn't know the pace we were going to be setting this semester, I didn't map it out as specifically as I sometimes do in the schedule.
I did a little.
You mapped it out some?
Yeah, I thought
Yeah.
we should do do a test every 3 weeks.
Yeah, so,
And then we'll do a test on a Thursday.
yeah, that's what I've actually got now. As you can see, I hand wrote it out, and then I went ahead and put it in Canvas this morning.
Okay.
So this thing doesn't have the right dates on it yet,
Yeah.
but Canvas has the right dates. But as far as like within each lesson, I didn't really map out which Roman numerals I thought we were gonna get to on any given day. So,
I kind of want to skip
do you guys feel like we've done enough of this for now to look at the next concept, or do you want to continue with E and F?
I don't want to continue with that, but
Okay.
honestly, I don't really want to do the things that you can do on your own. I'd rather do it with
Okay.
the free questions that don't have answers.
Okay, so does that work for you guys, to look for where there's a listen symbol and do those on your own time, and only ask me for help if you're not getting the answers that the CD have and you can't figure out why not?
Oh, we can all
And
do
then
it
we can
together.
use time in class to work on these other activities that aren't on the CDs, so that we don't run out of time, because we're doing a fairly short period before the chapter test. right? And there's a lot of material. These chapters are really dense.
Yeah.
So going forward, does that make sense for you guys? So-
And like you said, if it's a big enough issue, we can just bring it up in class.
Right, yeah, you can always ask the question. You know, I'm not gonna say, oh, that was on your CD, you should have done it, so I'm not gonna answer your question. You know, but if we can do the CD work ahead of time, so like for next class, you would work on
We work on.
Roman numeral
4B.
4A on
Oh,
your
yeah,
own.
4A.
Do B and C also so that you can come in with answers hopefully already prepared so that you're not floundering. And since 4 is a short section, probably also prepare 5 the same way.
5A
Do
and B.
A and B on your own. Do C with a view toward checking those answers in class. Yeah, so just looking at today, if we finish C, if we finish Roman numeral 3 rather, today, so we did C, D, hopefully we'll get to E and maybe F, we'll see. Then next class, if we do 4 and 5, and then Tuesday of the following week, we do the matome, could be 6,
Yeah. And then have our test.
and then hopefully have some time to look at the yomikaki section as well. Yomikaki hen is important, I think, as well, so, so I'm making note that we're gonna try for Roman numeral 6 and the kanji stuff on Tuesday, and then the test will be Thursday of next week. Does that sound like a schedule you guys can
Yeah.
deal with?
Yeah.
The kanji section's
Okay.
not even too big, this chapter.
Yeah.
I looked through
Right.
it.
Okay,
There's
yeah.
one big block of text, but
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
so
not too
there's, you know, the usual number of kanji introduced, some review activities and expressions, and then a fairly short tango list, which is nice for a change, and a few questions, and, oh yeah, it's
there's a
the,
block of text.
yeah,
I don't really understand what they're asking here. Like, are they just?
those are, Part B, 次の漢字を
No, A.
読みましょう。A、次の漢字の読み方を覚えましょう。当時は新しい読み方です。They're just pointing out readings for some of these that you may not have been aware of. You might have, they're showing you that, hey, part of this is a kanji that you've already studied elsewhere,
Yeah.
and part of this is a kanji that we just introduced. And
Okay.
here's a juxtaposition of them that has a different pronunciation than you may be expecting. So like the
So-
kazoku, I believe the ka was introduced ages ago,
Yeah.
but the zoku is new, right?
Mhm.
So you may not have known that ie is also pronounced ka sometimes. So that kazoku reading may be new to you.
Oh, I
You've been
understand.
paying attention to the kanji all
Yeah.
along, so these are probably not new to you.
Yeah, because I was
But
like.
not everybody was paying attention to the kanji readings when it was a reading other than the one that was required for that chapter.
Because I was confused. I was like, is this a question?
Yeah,
I didn't.
they just want you to learn those readings if you don't already know them,
Okay, yeah.
okay? So some,
That's what I was thinking, but I wanted
yeah.
to make sure.
So something like Hokkaido, we didn't know all the pieces of Hokkaido before now we do. So now you can read that place name.
Okay.
you know.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so getting back to this, because we don't have a whole lot of time left. So, the pair work one, let's just do it as a group of 3. So, the information that's missing for one person is going to be on the other sheet for the other person to know. So like if you're trying to figure out what Takashi gave to Mary, you can look at the other sheet and it shows you that he gave her flowers, right? Does everybody understand how that works? You know, if you were doing it in pairs, one of you would only look at one page, the other person would only look at the other page, but we're gonna do it our usual in-class way. So let's just let Seth read part A of the example and Joe read part B of the example to get it started.
And this is picture B, right?
Well, I'm looking at picture A, but I think it's the same,
It's the same sentence.
it's the same
It's the same
sentences.
sentence.
はい、どうぞ。
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. So, たけしさんはメリさんに何をあげましたか?
Okay, and for that question you would answer,
花をあげました。
right,
もらいました。
はい、花をあげました because he asked あげました. And then the second question would be,
メリさんはたけしさんに何をもらいましたか?
花をもらいました。
はい、花をもらいました. So you see how that works? They're giving you both alternatives and you're practicing both ways of saying it.
Oh, okay.
Both ways of answering, but I think it makes more sense to ask the question one way and answer that appropriate way, and then practice asking the question the other way and answering it the other way. To read both questions first and then give both answers seems like you're not practicing it the way you would use it in real life. Doesn't make sense, right? So, Joe-san, I guess you can just pick which one you want to ask about, since they don't seem to have numbered these.
It's like I and then I guess whoever the partner is.
Right.
I guess that's how they figure it out.
Yeah.
So,
So I guess you can be the I
yeah.
of one of those pictures, and Ellie will be the partner of whichever picture you're working from. Should we just start by working from the picture on page 67, and then when we've completed the ones
And then
that
we'll-
that picture has an answer for,
Okay.
you know,
Okay.
let's move on?
That'll work.
Okay, どうぞ。
エリーさんはたけしさんに何をあげましたか?
So you're the partner in this
What
question.
did I give them to Kish?
Yeah.
Oh, T-shirtsをあげます。あげました。
はい. Okay, and you wouldn't need a morale sentence in this case. It doesn't make any sense there. Okay, so and then Eri-san, you get to ask
Oh,
Sesu-kun about one of them.
okay. 私はメイさんに何をくれましたか?
In this case, since you're the one giving, it would be あげましたか?
Oh, since
Since
Mhm.
you're giving it to her.
I was looking at the other one while I'm receiving it.
But you didn't say receiving, you said あげました.
Oh, yeah. I said,
Good at it, but
But
It
kureru
makes
works
sense.
for someone else giving it to you.
oh.
You don't give it to someone else with kureru.
Okay, so it's 私はメリさんに何をあげました?
Nani, what, yeah, if you're asking what did you give to Mary?
Mhm.
Or if you're asking what,
What Mary gave to me.
oh, you're trying to ask what Mary gave to you, so, watashi wa,
メリさんに.
but now it's your turn, you're this I.
On that one?
Yeah, you were this one for Joe asking you, but now you're this one, because now you're the instigator.
Okay.
Okay, so
I'm so
So-
confused.
stick to this page.
Uh-huh.
For you, the person who's asking the question is on this page for now.
Mhm.
Person answering is gonna look at the other page. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
This is a very confusing exercise to do
Yeah,
with three people.
I'm really confused actually.
Yeah, okay, so pretend you're this person and you can ask a question about one of the ones that's a question mark. So like, you can ask Seth what he gave
Oh,
Takeshi,
okay,
or you can
okay.
ask Seth what he gave Mary,
Oh,
or
I
what Mary gave him.
understand now. Okay.
wait, I'm partner right now, right?
Right now, you're
Okay.
partner.
Okay.
So, Sesu-san wa Maryさんに何をあげましたか?
はい。
えーっと
I was wondering why I was
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
So, if I say, Mary-san wa watashi ni,
No,
No, can't
because
say that.
she asked what you
what
gave
I
Mary.
gave her, yeah, can I not say moral now, or no?
You
You-
answer with
You're,
agemash.
you're this person, and you asked what Mary
That's
gave
supposed to
him
be-
or what he gave Mary, I
Right.
forgot.
What he gave Mary.
So you're asking, you're answering about mafura.
Ah, okay. Okay, my bad.
Now this is confusing.
Yeah.
But her name would still go first, I believe, right?
Doesn't have to.
You don't even have to know
Eh,
You
Okay.
could say Mary-san ni.
Yeah, okay. Okay. 私はメリーさんにマフラーをあげた。
はい。
Yeah.
そうですね. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, there are way too many levels to this exercise.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're trading
Oh,
positions.
seconds.
Okay, so now you're this guy,
Mhm.
and Joe is this guy, and you're asking him one of the ones that's still a question mark that we haven't answered yet on that page. So you asked, so this one
Okay,
about
so
what some,
he
what.
did this one already, or
Yeah,
sorry, the
this
example
one's
did.
been done, this one's been done,
No, this one can
that
be
one
done.
can be done next.
And they did this already.
I
Yeah.
forget,
We did the T-shirt.
We did the T-shirt.
Hey,
yeah,
okay.
we
T-shirt.
did the T-shirt, yeah, so we did that
Okay,
one already,
so
so
there's one
this
more.
is what's left from this page.
Okay. I'm using his name,
Right.
so.
Joe-san.
Joe-san. Yes, Joe-san wa Mary-san ni nani o agemashita ka?
That
I
would be
understand.
this one, which you already
Oh, sorry.
answered, so that would be.
Moraimashita ka?
はい。何をもらいましたか?
So it's,
That's the watch.
yeah. It's the Mary-san wa, Joe-san wa Mary-san.
私は。
私は。Let's try that.
Yeah.
私はメリーさんに時計をもらいます。
もらいました。
もらいました。
はい。Okay. Are we doing okay so far? Sort of.
Speaking in the third person.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so we've completed the ones that are question marks on this first page. So now we're looking at the second page. Okay, and so, Joe, now you're taking the place of the watashi that gave the T-shirt.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're asking what Ellie, who's taking the place of this partner, gave to either Mary or gave or received with Takashi. One of those three options.
Alright. So, エリさんは、メリーさんに、何をあげましたか?
Okay, so, and you're the eye that's on the first picture. You,
The one with the
No.
complete eyes.
you're this eye now.
oh, okay. Jisho o agemashita.
はい、辞書をあげました. Perfect. Okay.
So now I'm
So
this eye.
now you're
Now-
this eye,
Okay.
and what's left to ask about is giving or received from Takeshi.
Okay.
So either what Seth got from Takeshi or what Seth gave to Takeshi.
Okay.
You choose what you want to ask about.
Takeshi-san wa Sesu-san ni nani o moraimashita ka? What did-
Okay, yeah. What did he
Okay,
receive
sure.
from you? Yeah.
たけしさんは私にgive me a second. Safe? No, what's it called?
she asked what he received from you. So what did you give him, in other words? Takeshi-san,
Oh my god.
isn't that what you said?
Yeah.
Takeshi-san wa?
I'm just trying to remember vocabulary.
タケシさんは、さつさんに何をもらいましたか
I'm sorry if I like
Okay, so boshi is the word you're looking for.
Oh, they don't have a specific word for that, huh? Okay.
Baseball cap, but I think they usually
That's
just call it
stupid.
boshi.
I'm gonna call it boshi.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so, Takeshi-san wa, or, watashi ni, boshi o
もらいまし
もらいました
た is what fits
もらった
grammatically, but
Yeah.
もらった but it would be better to say 私は
私はたけしさんに帽子をあげた。
はい、そうですね。Okay, now you're switching roles once more, so now you're the I over here, and you're asking Joe what he got from Takeshi, right? Because that's the one thing that's left. Okay.
Okay. たけしさんはジョーさんに何をあげた？
Yeah,
もら
何をあげました
あげましたか？ Let's just-
And I can answer this with saying you will more
あげま
はい
した。
Yeah, you could say たけしさんに財布をもらった。Yeah.
Takeshiに財布をもらった。
はい、もらいました。or, yeah. たけしさんは私に財布をくれました。That would be the other option. Okay. So that one may need more work as far as, like getting comfortable with it. But that particular exercise might not be the best one to try to do with 3 people. The next time you're in the language lab, you might want to try just doing it one-on-one with a single partner.
Yeah, that was confusing.
So,
It's way past.
is it way past
Yeah, it's
that
1:30.
clock? Oh, wow, that clock
It's
is
1:30.
definitely in need of a new battery.
Yeah,
It's,
I was wondering why you said we don't have very long. It was like 4 minutes, like at the time. It's like
Oh, wow.
1:11. So
Yeah, kind of is. Yeah.
It's
that
just
has
stuck
something
in
different.
place now. If you could do me a favor and just take it down from the wall, then I can go ask for a battery, and then I can find somebody else tall to put it back up for me later.
I know phones are unclean anyway, but yeah, there you
So,
go. I know it. I just was wondering.
okay, so for next class, do you guys want to start with F because we didn't get a chance to finish that? Or do you want to skip right over to the next grammar structure and come back to F if we have time?
I think we could probably all just go through it, and then if we have an issue, we'll bring it up.
Okay.
Thursday. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be able to be utterly finished with this like chapter
Okay.
by Tuesday. Yeah.
Okay, so for, let's see, today's Thursday, right? No, today's
today's Tuesday.
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 So on Thursday, are we gonna start from 4B? Is that what you wanna do?
We can. It depends.
Okay,
What you
I'm
guys
putting my bookmark there, but
Okay.
I'm gonna put that we only got through E here, so I'm gonna put 3F as a question mark. And then we're gonna aim for also finishing 4 and 5 in class. So if you guys can do the exercises that are marked with the listening symbol on your own time, and also try to work through the other ones as much as you can, and if you have questions, you can, highlight what you have questions about, so we make sure we take the time to cover the things you really have questions about, but we can kind of go quickly through the stuff that you feel is easy.
Okay.
Okay?
The clock actually is working now since it's like that.
Oh, because it's laying down.
Yeah, it's actually.
That's crazy. Doesn't mean